Most people fear dying alone. I feared waking up. Because waking up meant remembering I had nothing, and no one. Alright, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. My name's Grace Whitaker. I'm 72 years old. I sleep under a bridge in St. Louis. And I used to have a voice that could quiet any room. Now, the only one who hears me is the wind. Rain tapped like nails on the concrete above. Cars rolled over the bridge, their engines dull and distant, as if the world was busy forgetting whoever lived beneath it. A crumpled blanket shifted against a column, and from beneath it, a pair of weary eyes opened. Grace sat up slowly, pushing the damp cover from her shoulders. Her gray curls were tied back with a shoelace, her boots mismatched, the left one duct-taped around the toe. A plastic bag tied with string held her entire world, a blanket, a cracked thermos, and a plastic comb. The sound of wrappers rustled as she dug out a granola bar, bent, partially crushed, but still sealed. She bit it slowly. Chewed without blinking. Stared at nothing. A police siren wailed in the distance. Somewhere, a baby cried. The city spoke in pain. Grace shifted again. Her knees cracked. Her breath puffed in the cold. She wiped condensation from a piece of broken mirror propped between bricks and tried to smooth her face, as if the attempt at vanity might summon her old self back. Then, the sound of heels. Fast. Clean. Purposeful. She tensed. Reached under her blanket for a long metal spoon, sharpened to a point. The steps stopped. A woman stepped into view under the harsh light of a traffic lamp. Her coat, long, black wool, clung perfectly to her frame. Her gloves were leather. Her hair tucked beneath a structured hat. She looked like she'd just stepped out of a Manhattan lobby. Grace's eyes narrowed. The woman didn't speak. Grace gripped the spoon tighter. Finally, the woman took one step closer and said, "Grace." Grace didn't blink. "Who are you?" The woman removed her hat. Let her blonde hair fall loose. "It's me," she said. "Margot." Grace stood slowly. Her blanket fell to the ground. "You shouldn't be here. I had to come. You don't get to do that." "I know." Grace's voice lowered to a growl. "You called me a disgrace in front of our mother. You locked the door when I had nowhere to go. You never even came to Nina's hearing." Margot's throat tightened. "I know. Why now?" Margot stepped aside, revealing a black SUV idling behind her. Inside, a driver sat motionless. "Because there's something you need to know," she said. "And because we don't have time." Grace stared at the car. Then at her sister. And then, without a word, she turned, not toward the car, not toward Margot, but back toward the wall, and picked up the photograph lying near her sleeping mat. She wiped the rain from it, then turned around. She walked past Margot, toward the SUV. As she opened the door, Margot said, barely above a whisper, "I didn't expect to find you alive." Grace paused, one foot inside. "I wasn't." She got in and shut the door. "The last time I saw my sister, she slammed a door on my face and told me I was dead to her." Grace sat stiff in the SUV, her shoulders hunched as if she expected to be thrown out at any moment. The leather seat creaked under her weight, too smooth, too clean. She hadn't felt something that soft against her back in years. Across from her, Margot sat poised. Her posture perfect, hands folded in her lap like she was hosting an afternoon tea. Only the way her fingers tugged slightly at her gloves betrayed the nerves. The car pulled away from the curb, gliding like a ghost down wet streets. Rain speckled the windows. "You hungry?" Margot asked after a silence too thick to breathe in. Grace didn't answer. Margot tried again. "There's food in the bag. Sandwiches. Bottled water." Grace turned her head slowly, staring her sister dead in the eye. "You think a sandwich makes up for 30 years? Margot's jaw tightened. "No." Grace shifted, the movement causing a rustle of her weather-beaten tote bag. She glanced at the polished interior, the soft lights, the perfume in the air, the world she once thought she belonged to. "I'm not a charity case." "I didn't say you were." You didn't have to. The driver kept silent, eyes locked on the road. Rain danced across the windshield. Margot cleared her throat. You look. Grace laughed, sharp, bitter. Careful. I was going to say, tired. Tired of being alive? Tired of waiting for someone to care? Tired of sleeping next to strangers who scream in their sleep? Grace's voice cracked. Yeah. That about covers it. Margot said nothing. Grace looked out the window again. Her reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, drawn, proud. Why are you doing this, Margot? The words sat in the air. Because I want to talk to you, Margot said softly. Grace turned back slowly. You could have done that any year between 1994 and now. I know. Then why now? Margot's hands clutched tighter. Because you deserve the truth. Grace narrowed her eyes. What truth? Margot hesitated. Then, from her purse, she pulled out a thick yellowed envelope. Folded, sealed, the edges worn. She held it like it might burn her. She offered it across the seat. Grace didn't move. What is that? Our mother wrote it. For you. The SUV hit a bump. Grace's head snapped back toward Margot. That's not funny. I'm not joking. You told me she never wanted to speak to me again. Margot looked down. Her voice barely rose above the hum of the tires. I lied. Silence filled the space between them like a flood. Grace stared at the envelope. Why? I thought I was protecting her. And maybe myself too. You were spiraling. I didn't know how to help you. So you exiled me. I was scared. Angry. And I was wrong. Grace's hand trembled slightly as she reached out. She touched the envelope, then snatched it away like Margot might change her mind. She stared at the name. Her name. Written in a shaky but familiar hand. Why now, Margot? Margot's voice broke, quiet and frayed. Because I'm sick. Grace looked up. Margot gave her a small nod. I don't know how much time I have. But I didn't want to leave without giving you the piece of her she meant for you to have. Grace stared at her sister. The enemy. The ghost. The girl who once braided her hair and then years later called her unfit. She tucked the envelope inside her coat, close to her chest. The car turned down a long, winding drive lined with trees. Margot turned to the window. I don't expect you to forgive me. Grace looked down at her cracked hands. I didn't come for forgiveness, Margot said. Then what? Margot looked straight ahead. To tell you what I should have said when we were still sisters. The car rolled to a stop in front of a massive house with tall gates and warm glowing windows. Someone stood at the front door, young, watching, arms crossed. Grace narrowed her eyes. Who the hell is that? She looked like money. I smelled like the street. But we were sisters, and ghosts don't let go easily. The SUV pulled through the iron gates with a soft mechanical hiss. Gravel crunched under the tires as they approached a sprawling, stone-front home set far back from the road. It was the kind of house Grace had only seen in magazines, not the kind you're invited into. Not when you look like her. The porch lights lit the driveway in golden hues. Wrought iron railings. Ivy-covered brick. The kind of warm, staged beauty that screamed legacy and money. Grace sat rigid in her seat, shoulders drawn in, her tote bag clutched tightly. At the top of the stairs, a teenage girl stood in the doorway. Tall. Thin. Shoulders tense. Her arms crossed. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. Who's that? Grace asked. Margot straightened her coat. Eliza, she said. Grace blinked. Your daughter? Margot hesitated. Adopted. 3 years ago. Does she know you have a sister? Margot didn't answer. The driver opened Grace's door. The cold bit her first. Then the smell, manicured grass, wood smoke, and wealth. Grace stepped out slowly, adjusting her coat. She heard Eliza's voice before she saw her up close. You brought someone. Margot walked ahead, past Grace, up the steps. This is my sister, Grace, she said gently. She'll be staying with us for a little while. Eliza's eyes flicked over Grace like a scanner. Her expression stayed blank, except for the tightness around her mouth. Right. The door opened. The warmth inside hit Grace like a wave: cinnamon, candle wax, polished wood floors. Inside, Grace took small steps, afraid her boots might leave permanent stains on the tile. The living room was a museum: white couches, a fireplace the size of a bedroom, books arranged by color. Grace stood there, dripping faintly onto the floor, as Margot took off her gloves. Eliza hovered nearby, clearly watching. "Where should I put my bag?" Grace asked. Margot gestured toward the stairs. "There's a guest room on the second floor." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Guest room?" Margot's voice softened. "It's clean. Comfortable. You'll have privacy. I haven't slept in a room in years." Margot nodded. "I know." Eliza suddenly interjected. "Do you want me to take her up?" "No," Margot said. "I'll do it." Grace followed her sister upstairs. The hallway smelled like lavender. Her boots echoed on the hardwood. Margot opened a door. A soft light glowed from a bedside lamp. The bed was made. White sheets. A folded towel on the dresser. Grace stepped inside, dazed. "I'll let you settle," Margot said. "Bathroom's through that door. If you need anything." "I won't," Grace cut her off. Margot gave her a long look. Then nodded and left, closing the door softly behind her. Grace stood in the center of the room. Her tote slipped from her shoulder and landed on the rug with a dull thud. She walked to the nightstand. Something caught her eye: a small drawer. Not locked, but stiff. She pulled it open. Inside, a dusty old music box, paint-chipped, the tiny ballerina frozen mid-spin. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. It was hers. It had been in her childhood bedroom. She hadn't seen it since she was 17. Her thumb brushed the tiny gold key underneath. She turned it once. The music box clicked. The melody, slow, slightly warped, filled the room. And then her throat tightened. Her eyes burned. Because Margot had kept it all these years. She sat on the edge of the bed, the music box in her lap, while the notes played out like a whisper from the past. There was a soft knock at the door. When she opened it, Margot stood there, holding a letter in her hand. "It's time," she said. "I didn't expect her to have a mansion. I didn't expect her to have a daughter." The music box was still turning in Grace's lap when Margot knocked. She stood in the doorway, holding a letter, unsealed. Her face was unreadable. "I think it's time you read this." Grace took it slowly. The envelope was stiff, its edges frayed from years untouched. Her name was written in careful cursive: Grace Marie Whitaker. "It's from Mom," Margot said. "She gave it to me before she died. Told me to give it to you." Grace looked up. "Why didn't you?" Margot's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She turned away. "Read it when you're ready." Eliza made dinner. The door closed softly. Grace sat for a long time before she rose. She tucked the letter inside her coat pocket and left the room. Downstairs, the dining room gleamed. A chandelier cast gold light across a long oak table. A single casserole dish steamed in the center, surrounded by 2 glasses of wine and 1 glass of water. Eliza stood at the head of the table, her arms crossed, eyes fixed on Grace. "You don't have to eat with us," she said flatly. Grace paused in the doorway. "You made all this?" "No. Margot did." Grace stepped in slowly, her boots brushing the edge of a silk rug. "You don't trust me," she said plainly. "I don't know you." "That's fair. A beat." "I know women like you," Eliza added. "You show up when people are dying. You leave when the money dries up." Grace raised an eyebrow. "That what you think this is?" Eliza's expression didn't shift. Margot entered, placing a salad bowl on the table. "Enough," she said, her voice low but sharp. Eliza pulled out a chair. Grace stood. "Don't bother," Grace said. "I'll eat in the kitchen." "You're not a maid," Margot said. "No. Just a mistake someone couldn't throw away." Grace left the room. She sat on a bar stool at the kitchen counter, a plate of casserole and a glass of tap water in front of her. Through the open archway, she heard soft clinks of silverware. Eliza's voice, low. Margot's answering. The conversation was quiet, not private, but just quiet enough to keep her out. She finished the food in silence, then rinsed her plate. Upstairs, the guest room felt smaller. She sat on the bed, pulled the letter from her coat, and stared at it for several minutes. She didn't open it. Not yet. She lay down, letting the silence settle over her like dust. Then, creaking floorboards outside. A faint rustle. She sat up. Moved to the door. Opened it. The hallway was empty. She turned toward the bathroom, then stopped. The drawer of the hallway cabinet, the one she noticed earlier, was cracked open. She walked over. Inside, beneath folded towels, something gleamed. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it free. A box. Old. Wooden. Familiar. She flipped the lid. Inside, old photos, a worn cross, a handkerchief she hadn't seen in 40 years, stitched with her initials. And folded beneath it all, a page torn from her childhood diary. Grace stared at it. There was no mistaking it. Margot had saved her things. She held the box in her hands, stunned. Behind her, the hallway light clicked on. Grace turned. Eliza stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed again. "What is that?" she asked. Grace swallowed. "Something your mother never told me she kept." Eliza tilted her head. "She keeps everything," she said. "Especially secrets." Eliza turned and walked back toward her room, her final words trailing behind her. "You should be careful." Around her. "She kept my music box. She kept our mother's letter. What else had she kept from me?" The morning light filtered in through sheer curtains, pale and soft. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, the wooden box open beside her, the past spilling into the present. Old photographs. Her diary entry from age 16, one she'd thought lost the day her mother threw it out during a screaming match. A locket that once belonged to their grandmother. Things no one should have saved. But Margot had. Grace's fingers moved through them gently, as if touching too hard might make them vanish. The envelope lay on her lap. She hadn't opened it last night. She'd barely slept. Just sat with it resting against her heart, like a question without an answer. She ran a finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper, yellowed but intact. Her mother's handwriting was unmistakable. Slanted. Careful. The way she used to write recipes. "Grace. If you're reading this, it means I finally found my courage, or Margot did. I want you to know something that I could never say aloud. I didn't push you away because I hated you. I pushed you away because I hated myself for not protecting you. I was afraid. Of your anger. Of your choices. But mostly of my own silence. I let others talk me into things I regret every day. I wish I could go back. But if I can't, I want you to know this. You were never the disgrace. I was. Forgive me if you can. Mom." Grace stared at the paper. The room spun gently. She rose to her feet and walked straight to the hallway. Her steps were slow, deliberate, like she was walking into a fire. Downstairs, Margot stood in the kitchen, stirring coffee in a ceramic mug. Her hair was neatly pinned, her blouse crisp. She looked like she belonged in a catalog. Grace held up the letter without a word. Margot turned, saw it, and her face paled. "She wrote me," Grace said. "You told me she never wanted to speak to me again." Margot opened her mouth, then shut it. "She begged me to come home." "And you," Grace's voice cracked. "You kept this." Margot looked down. "She gave it to me to deliver." "You didn't. I wasn't sure you'd read it. That wasn't your choice." "I know. You told me she died angry with me. You let me carry that for 30 years. Margot set the mug down. "You were using. You were unstable." Grace stepped forward. "I was still her daughter. And I was trying to protect her," Margot said, voice rising. She was dying. I didn't want her to spend her final months waiting for a daughter who might never show up. I thought, her voice broke. I thought I was doing the right thing. Grace's hands were shaking now. You took everything. Even her last words. I was wrong, Margot whispered. You think that fixes it? Margot didn't answer. Grace turned and walked out of the room. Her breath was coming fast. Her hands went white around the stair rail. Halfway up the stairs, she stumbled. Grace. Grace gripped the wall. I'm fine. No, you're not. I'm not the one hiding letters. A sudden noise behind her, the crash of a mug shattering. Grace turned around just in time to see Margot stagger, one hand clutching her stomach, the other gripping the countertop. Her knees buckled. Margot. Grace rushed down as Margot crumpled onto the floor. Eliza. Grace shouted. Call someone. Now. Eliza appeared from the hallway, wide-eyed, already dialing. Margot lay curled on the tile, her breath shallow, her face pale. Grace, she whispered, reaching for her hand. Grace knelt beside her, pressing her palm to her sister's cold fingers. Stay with me. Don't you dare. As sirens wailed in the distance, Grace knelt over Margot's body, her mother's letter clutched in one hand, her sister's trembling in the other. She wasn't just sick. She was dying, and I was too late again. Margot asks Grace to become Eliza's guardian after her death. Fluorescent lights buzzed above Grace's head as she sat stiffly in the plastic chair outside the ICU. Her fingers were still smeared with Margot's perfume. Her knees ached from kneeling. Her throat from shouting. Eliza paced a few feet away, arms locked around herself like a shell. Her phone buzzed once, twice. She ignored it. A nurse finally emerged from the double doors. Young, calm, clipboard in hand. She's awake. You can see her. One at a time. Eliza turned to Grace, eyes wide. I'll go first, she said. Grace didn't argue. She watched Eliza disappear through the doors. The waiting room was silent but heavy, the kind of silence where breathing feels like a crime. Grace stared at the floor tiles. She thought of the letter. Of her sister lying pale on the kitchen floor. Of everything she hadn't said. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Eliza returned, face pale but dry. She's asking for you. Grace rose, her feet dragging slightly across the linoleum. Inside the ICU room, Margot looked smaller than she ever had. The wires and monitors seemed oversized for her thin frame. Her skin was too pale. Her eyes too bright. She looked up as Grace entered. Took your time, she whispered, managing a weak smile. I was giving you a chance to die before I told you off again. Margot chuckled, then winced. Don't make me laugh. Grace pulled a chair close. Sat down. The silence hovered, then Margot said, Stage 4. Bone metastasis. It's in my spine now. Grace's jaw tightened. She didn't speak. I've known for 8 months. You didn't tell Eliza? She knows the basics. Not the clot. Margot turned her face toward the window. I thought I had more time. We all do, don't we? Grace looked at her. You could have told me. About the letter. About this. I thought I'd have time to explain. Margot swallowed. I was wrong. Grace reached over, rested her hand on Margot's wrist. Her touch was surprisingly gentle. How long? Maybe 6 weeks. If I'm lucky. Grace nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the machines. Margot's voice cracked. Grace. I need to ask you something. Grace looked at her. Don't ask me to forgive you right now. No, Margot paused. I'm asking you to take care of Eliza. Grace blinked. What? She'll have the house, the trust. Everything is arranged legally. But she needs someone. I'm a stranger to her. She won't trust anyone else. I won't have time to transition her to someone new. She doesn't even like me. You didn't like me yesterday either. Grace stood, pacing the small room. This is insane. You think just because we share blood, I'm suddenly going to raise a teenager? After 30 years in the street? After losing my own daughter? You didn't lose Nina. I took her from you. Grace stopped cold. Margot's eyes filled with tears. She reached out to me. Years ago. I told her not to contact you. I thought I was protecting her. Or punishing you. Or maybe just being selfish. Grace didn't move. Her silence was louder than any scream. I'm sorry, Margot whispered. For all of it. Grace didn't respond. She stood in the sterile room, her fists clenched, her breath ragged. Eliza appeared at the doorway. Is everything okay? Grace turned, her eyes hard. You tell me. Margot looked from Grace to Eliza. If I don't make it through the week, she said, promise me you'll try, both of you. I lost my daughter long ago. Now I was being handed someone else's, and she wanted nothing to do with me. The ride home from the hospital was silent. Grace sat in the front seat. Eliza in the back, earbuds in, hood up. The air inside the SUV was thick, not just with tension, but with everything neither of them knew how to say. When they reached the house, Grace got out first. Eliza didn't move until the driver came around and opened her door. Inside, the house felt colder, emptier. Margot's absence was loud. Eliza threw her backpack by the door and disappeared upstairs. Grace stood alone in the foyer, staring at the polished floor, her boots leaving small, wet marks. She turned toward the kitchen. Then stopped. No food. No Margot. No idea what came next. Hours passed. Grace reheated a bowl of leftover soup and sat at the breakfast bar, stirring it more than eating. Eliza came in, hoodie off now, her eyes red but dry. Grace didn't speak. Eliza opened the fridge, grabbed a soda, and leaned against the counter. You're not my mom, she said. Grace nodded slowly. No, I'm not. You can't just show up and take her place. I'm not trying to. Then why are you here? Grace looked up at her. Because she asked me to be. Eliza snorted. That's all it takes? Grace stood. Look, I didn't ask for this either. I'm not trying to parent you. I'm trying to figure out how not to drown while keeping her house warm. They locked eyes. I don't need you, Eliza said. You might be right, Grace said. But she does. The words hung in the air like smoke. Eliza opened her soda and walked away without another word. That night, Grace returned to her guest room. She sat on the bed, flipping through an old notebook she found buried in the box of her things. Her handwriting, once so proud, now felt like a letter from a stranger. A knock startled her. She opened the door. It wasn't Eliza. It was a lawyer, sharp suit, tablet in hand. Ms. Whitaker, he said. I'm here to speak with you and Eliza regarding Margot's advance directive and estate planning. Grace blinked. Now? He nodded. She insisted. Grace stepped aside, let him in. They gathered in the living room. Eliza sat on one end of the couch, arms folded. Grace on the other, trying not to fidget. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Devereaux has named you, Grace Whitaker, as temporary co-guardian and executor, effective immediately. Full guardianship will pass automatically upon her passing, unless contested. Eliza stood. What? She's not dead yet, she snapped. She's preparing, he said calmly. Grace didn't move. I'll give you both a moment, he said, standing. As he left, Eliza turned toward Grace, eyes blazing. You think this fixes anything? I didn't ask for this. Then why didn't you say no? I didn't want her to die thinking she was leaving you alone. Eliza's hands were fists now. She's not even gone yet, and you're already acting like you belong here. I'm acting like I care. You don't know anything about me. No, Grace said quietly. But I know what it feels like to be left behind. Eliza's jaw twitched. She stormed out of the room. 10 minutes later, Grace returned to her guest room. Her box sat open on the bed, photos scattered. The letter from her mother unfolded, lying flat like a wound. She picked it up. Underlined. Highlighted. Read. And then she heard footsteps. Eliza appeared in the doorway, holding the letter in one hand. You kept this? She asked, voice brittle. Grace nodded. Without warning, Eliza began reading. Aloud. Line by line. Margot appeared behind her, fragile but upright. I asked you both to try, she said softly. Eliza's voice broke as she read the final line, you were never the disgrace. I was. Then she looked up at Grace, eyes flooded with something Grace couldn't name yet. Not trust. Not forgiveness. But maybe, recognition. Eliza's voice echoed in the living room, sharp and unwavering as she read the last line of the letter. You were never the disgrace. I was. Silence followed. No one moved. Margot leaned against the doorway, her face pale, her breath shallow. Grace stood rooted in the middle of the room, her hands clenched by her sides. Eliza, still holding the letter, looked like she wanted to tear it in half and hug it at the same time. That's what she said, Eliza whispered, eyes locked on Margot. And you hid it. Margot's lips parted. I was trying to protect her. No, Eliza snapped. You were protecting yourself. Margot took a slow step forward. You don't understand what it was like. I don't care. Eliza's voice cracked. You told me she abandoned you. That she was unstable. Dangerous. You lied. I was afraid she'd hurt me again, Margot said softly. I never laid a hand on you, Grace snapped. You didn't have to. You disappeared. You gave up. And when I stepped in to clean up the pieces, I made choices I can't take back. Grace stared at her sister, fury rising like bile. You didn't clean up anything. You buried me. Margot flinched. Her hand reached instinctively for the edge of the couch for balance. I tried to fix things. You destroyed things, Grace cut in. You took a broken family and snapped what little was left between us. Between me and my daughter. Between you and your soul. I raised Eliza. Out of guilt? No, Margot's voice dropped. Out of love. Eliza looked at them both, her jaw clenched, tears shining but refusing to fall. Do either of you even know what love looks like? Neither woman answered. I'm not your second chance, Eliza said. I'm not your redemption arc. She turned and stormed out of the room. The slam of her bedroom door echoed. Grace sank slowly into a chair. Margot stood frozen. A minute passed. Then Margot swayed slightly. Margot? I'm fine. Grace stood again. You don't look fine. I just need. She sat down quickly, her hand pressed to her side, her face twitching in pain. I'll get water, Grace said, already moving toward the kitchen. She didn't make it far. The house phone rang, one of the few landlines still in use. Grace answered instinctively. Hello? Is this Grace Whitaker? Yes. This is Dr. Albright, from the oncology unit. I've been trying to reach Margot. She's resting, Grace said, her voice tight. We have results from her latest scans. I'm afraid there's been progression, aggressive. We need to see her as soon as possible. Grace's hand tightened around the receiver. How bad is it? The pause on the other end said everything. She may not make it through the month. Grace thanked him, hung up. She stood in the kitchen, staring at her reflection in the stainless steel fridge. Then turned and walked back into the living room. Margot was still sitting, breath shallow, eyes closed. Grace placed the water in front of her. Margot opened her eyes. What was it? Grace sat across from her. You need to go back in. Margot nodded slowly. I figured. Grace hesitated. I'll come with you. Margot's eyes welled with tears. You don't have to. I know. Upstairs, Eliza opened her window, the letter still clutched in her hand, and whispered, Why did you wait until everything was broken to start telling the truth? The hospital room was quiet, the blinds drawn to block the harsh afternoon sun. Margot sat propped up in bed, a scarf wrapped loosely around her head. Her skin looked translucent. The 4 machine clicked in quiet rhythm beside her. Grace sat near the window, flipping through a legal document, page after page of formal language and careful decisions. Are you sure about all of this? She asked without looking up. Margot exhaled. I've never been more sure of anything. Grace set the folder down on the side table. You're leaving me everything? No. I'm leaving Eliza everything. I'm leaving you the responsibility. Grace leaned back, her eyes heavy. I never got it right the first time. Margot smiled faintly. Neither did I. A knock broke the silence. The lawyer entered, the same one from the house, briefcase in hand, pressed shirt, polite smile. Ms. Devereaux, he greeted, nodding. Ms. Whitaker. Let's get on with it, Margot said. The lawyer reviewed the revised documents, power of attorney, guardianship transfers, the trust schedule for Eliza's inheritance. Grace signed first. Margot's hand shook slightly as she added hers. When the lawyer left, the room was quiet again. Margot turned her head toward Grace. There's one more thing. Grace sighed. There always is. Margot reached into the drawer of her side table and pulled out a thin envelope, unsealed, folded in half. She held it out. Grace took it cautiously. It's not from Mom, Margot said. It's from Nina. Grace froze. She found me years ago. Wrote me. Wanted to know where you were. Grace stared at her, her mouth dry. You never told me. I burned the first letter, Margot admitted. I was scared. I thought if you two reconnected, you'd pull her into your mess again. I thought I was protecting her. Grace's eyes brimmed with disbelief. She was my child. I know. Grace stood up suddenly, the envelope trembling in her hand. You took her away from me, twice. Margot looked down at her lap. I thought I was doing the right thing. You keep saying that. And you keep being wrong. Grace stepped back, pacing. She reached out. She was looking for me. And you let her believe I didn't care. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Margot's chest rose and fell in uneven waves. She looked smaller than ever. Grace opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, a photo. Nina, mid-20s, smiling, holding a baby on her hip. On the back, scrawled in ink. I don't know if you'll ever want me again. But I want to find out. Grace pressed the photo to her chest like a wound. Margot whispered, I'm sorry. Grace didn't respond. I didn't give it to you because I thought, maybe I'd find her myself. Maybe I could fix it. You wanted to fix everything but never started with yourself. Margot nodded faintly. Her eyes were glassy now. Grace walked to the door, hand gripping the knob. Eliza needs you, Margot said. I needed you, Grace snapped. She'll survive. Margot's voice cracked. She shouldn't have to survive another woman's silence. Grace stopped. She didn't turn around. She just walked out. Down the hallway. Out of the hospital. Into the cold wind, the envelope still clenched in her hand, her jaw set. As she stood at the corner, tears streaming quietly, Grace whispered to the air, Where are you, Nina? And for the first time in years, she wanted to be found. The wind off the river was brutal. It cut through Grace's coat as if she were wearing nothing at all. Her boots crunched across gravel and broken glass as she returned to the place she once called home, under the Jefferson Bridge. The same rusted beams. The same smell of oil and rain. It hadn't changed. But she had. She sat down where she used to sleep. Slowly. As if the concrete might remember her weight. Around her, the world kept moving. Cars above, sirens in the distance, laughter from somewhere too far to be real. She pulled out the envelope again. The photo of Nina stared up at her, wide smile, tired eyes. And the baby on her hip. Grace traced the lines of her daughter's face. She imagined her voice, her laugh. It felt like trying to remember a dream. She reached into her coat and pulled out a burner phone, old, scratched, prepaid. One of the few things she'd kept charged, though she hadn't checked it in weeks. There were 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. From a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated. Then she pressed play. A pause. Then a voice. Mom? I don't know if this number still works. I got it from some place you stayed at a few years back. I don't know. I'm just trying. The voice was older than she remembered, but unmistakably Nina's. I used to wonder what you looked like now. I used to think you just didn't want me anymore. Grace's fingers curled tightly around the phone. But maybe you couldn't come back. Maybe someone made you feel like you didn't deserve to. A shaky breath. I have a daughter now. Her name's Willow. She has your eyes. The wind howled around Grace as the words filled the space inside her, places long buried and closed off. I don't know what I'm doing. I keep screwing up. I look at her and I get scared that I'm becoming you. A beat. But I think I get it now. Why you left. Why you ran. I don't want to be like you, Mom. Always running. Click. Grace stared at the phone like it might ring again. It didn't. Her breath shook. Her eyes burned. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in years, not even herself. She whispered, I wasn't running from you. But there was no one to hear it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a pen. Wrote the number down on the edge of the photo. Folded it. Tucked it against her chest. A sound behind her, gravel shifting. She turned quickly, heart pounding. A man, one of the regulars from the underpass, nodded at her as he passed. Didn't say anything. Just recognized the weight on her shoulders. She stood. Wiped her eyes. Then started walking. Not toward the hospital. Not toward the house. But toward the payphone 2 blocks away. As she dropped the quarter into the slot and punched in the number, her hands trembled. On the third ring, a small voice answered, Hello? And Grace froze. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and lilacs, a strange combination that made Grace's stomach twist. Margot was sleeping when she arrived, her skin nearly translucent, her lips cracked from dehydration. Grace took a seat by the window. The same chair she had occupied a dozen times over the last 2 weeks. The number she called yesterday, Nina's, had gone straight to voicemail after that single hello. Grace hadn't dared leave a message. She just couldn't. Not yet. Now, watching Margot's chest rise and fall slowly under the oxygen mask, Grace felt the weight of things unsaid pressing against her ribs. Margot stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. She gave Grace a weak smile. You came back. I wasn't done yelling at you. A faint laugh. Then a wince. You're late. I started dying without you. Grace smirked. You're still dramatic. They sat in silence for a while, the beeping of the monitors filling in the space between words. I listened to her voicemail, Grace finally said. Margot's eyes blinked slowly. She sounded lost. Like we both were once. She has your fire, Margot said softly. But she leads with it instead of hiding behind it. Grace nodded. She has a daughter. Margot's lips curved faintly. Good. She named her Willow. That's beautiful. Silence again. Then Margot reached for the edge of her sheet. Grace. Grace stood, took her hand gently. I didn't protect you. Not when it mattered. No, Grace agreed. You didn't. Margot's eyes filled with tears. But I still loved you. Even when I hated you. Grace's voice cracked. I know. Margot squeezed her hand. I wanted us to fix it before I ran out of time. Grace knelt beside her bed. We didn't fix it, she said, but we stopped pretending it wasn't broken. Margot gave a small laugh that turned into a cough. Close enough. Footsteps approached. Eliza entered, carrying a blanket. She looked from Grace to Margot, then set it gently over her mother's legs. You should rest, she said quietly. Margot reached out, touched Eliza's wrist. I'm proud of you. Eliza nodded, but didn't speak. Margot's voice was barely audible now. Don't close off when I go. Let yourself feel it. Eliza looked away. Grace touched Margot's shoulder. You don't have to keep talking. I do, Margot whispered. I want my last words to count. You're not going tonight. I am. Grace's breath caught. No. Margot smiled again. You were always stubborn. Eliza pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down. They both held Margot's hands now, one on each side. Grace leaned in close. I forgive you, she said. Eliza whispered, me too. Margot's eyes slowly closed. Her lips parted once more. I'm not afraid. And then she was gone. The monitors beat. And then stopped. The silence was crushing. Grace didn't cry. Not yet. But when she looked up at Eliza, whose tears finally fell, she reached across the bed and held her tightly, as if neither of them wanted to be the first to let go. The house was too quiet. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was suspended, heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Grace stood in the foyer with her coat still on. It had been 2 days since Margot's passing, but the air inside felt frozen in time. Eliza was upstairs. They hadn't spoken much beyond the essentials. She walked into the kitchen. Everything was spotless, as if grief had no permission to leave traces here. A casserole dish wrapped in foil sat untouched in the fridge. Someone had dropped it off from the neighborhood. The card was still taped to the top, thinking of you, the Wagners. Grace stared at it for a long time, then shut the door. On the living room table, a stack of mail leaned against a vase. The top envelope was from the hospice service. She turned it over, unopened, and set it aside. Then she noticed a note, folded and clipped to the guest room key. It was Eliza's handwriting. You can move into Mom's room if you want. You've earned it. I'm not staying here tonight. Going to a friend's. Grace stared at the note, then at the hallway leading to Margot's room. She didn't want it. Didn't want the smell of lavender and unfinished apologies still clinging to the sheets. Didn't want the mirror where Margot had watched herself disappear. But she folded the note anyway. Slipped it into her coat. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find the same lawyer from the hospital standing with a leather briefcase in hand. Ms. Whitaker, he said. Do you have a moment? She nodded. He followed her into the sitting room and pulled papers from his case. Sat down carefully on the edge of the couch. Eliza will be receiving the full estate, that includes the house, the assets, the trust. Everything Margot intended. But she also left behind a sealed video message. For both of you. Grace's mouth went dry. She said it was to be delivered 48 hours after her passing. She was very clear. Grace sank into the chair opposite him. She recorded it before the cancer reached her spine. She wanted to make sure her voice came through clearly. Is Eliza aware? She will be. I'm meeting her later today. He paused. Studied Grace's expression. I think you might want to sit down for this. I am sitting. Then hold on. He handed her a small thumb drive. She wanted you to watch it alone first. Grace took it slowly. Her fingers wrapped around the plastic like it might explode. Do you know what's on it? The lawyer stood, collected his papers. No. But she looked peaceful when she recorded it. He left with a soft click of the door. Grace sat there, the thumb drive heavy in her palm. She didn't move for a long time. Then she looked up at the stairs. Then back down. And whispered, Margot, what did you do? She walked to the study, turned on the laptop Margot used to journal, and plugged in the drive. The screen lit up. Margot appeared, smiling, calm, eyes full of something Grace hadn't seen in a long time, truth. The screen lit up. Margot's face appeared, clear, alert, seated in her study. No tubes, no scarf, just her in a deep green blouse, her hair pinned up the way she always wore it when she meant business. She looked straight into the camera. Grace, she began, voice steady. If you're watching this, I'm gone. I wish I had said more when I was alive, but I never learned how to confess without breaking. She inhaled, then gave a faint smile. You always had the stronger heart. Even when it cracked. Grace sat motionless in the chair, her hand covering her mouth, eyes glued to the screen. I told you some things. I left others out. I suppose I was always editing the story to make myself feel less monstrous. Margot looked away briefly, then back. Nina reached out to me more than once. Grace's hand clenched against her knee. She asked if I knew where you were. Said she didn't care what had happened, she just wanted to hear your voice. Margot blinked fast. I told her I didn't know. That if I did, I would have told her. That was a lie. One of many. A beat. I told myself I was protecting her. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid she'd choose you. Afraid I'd lose her the way I lost you. And I couldn't stand the idea of you being the one to get her back. Grace felt her breath stutter. The air in the room grew tighter. I let her believe you were gone, Margot said. That you didn't want her. That she was better off not knowing. I made her grief cleaner by lying. She leaned forward. I was wrong. And I robbed you of something sacred. I can't undo that. But I can tell you this now, go find her. She's still looking for you. Grace's throat burned. Margot smiled faintly. You've survived so much, Grace. More than I ever could. And now, it's time you live. The screen faded to black. Grace sat in silence. No tears. Just stillness. Then she stood. She walked to the closet in the guest room, pulled down a small suitcase, not the broken tote she'd carried under the bridge. A proper suitcase. She folded a few clothes, tucked in the photo of Nina and Willow, slid the thumb drive into a side pocket. Then she opened the bottom drawer and found her old cross pendant, buried beneath socks. She placed it around her neck. Downstairs, Eliza sat at the dining table, earbuds in, journal open. Grace stepped into the doorway. I'm leaving for a bit. Eliza looked up. Where? To find someone I lost. Eliza stood. Her face unreadable. She'll be lucky if you do. Grace nodded. She's not the only one. Eliza took a step forward. Come back, okay? Grace gave her a rare smile. If I do, this place better not be a mess. They both laughed. Briefly. Grace zipped the suitcase shut. As she stepped onto the porch, she dialed the number again, Nina's. This time, it didn't go to voicemail. A woman's voice answered. Who is this? Grace swallowed. It's me, she said. It's your mother. I stood at the door like a ghost, hoping to be seen as a mother again. The neighborhood was quiet. Grace stepped out of the cab, suitcase in hand. Rows of modest homes stretched under a pale blue sky. Lawns slightly overgrown. A dog barked in the distance. She checked the address scribbled on the back of the photo, Nina L. Whitaker, 234, Crescent Avenue. House number 234 stood at the end of the street. Yellow siding. A dented mailbox. A tricycle half-tipped in the driveway. Grace's legs felt like stone as she walked up the path. Each step heavier than the last. She reached the door. Lifted her hand. Paused. Then knocked twice. The door opened within seconds. Nina. Late 30s. Worn but glowing. Dark curls pulled into a bun. She froze as soon as she saw Grace. The two women stared at each other. A beat passed. Then another. Nina's voice was sharp and cautious. I don't know what to say. Grace's voice cracked. I've been waiting for this moment for 30 years. I'll take anything. Nina didn't move. A small voice rang out from inside the house. Mom? A girl, no more than 6, peeked around Nina's leg. Grace stared. The child had her eyes. Her exact eyes. Willow, Nina said gently, still watching Grace, go back inside for a second, sweetheart. Willow hesitated, then disappeared. Grace took a breath. I'm not here to make demands. Or beg. I just wanted you to know I'm alive. I never stopped thinking about you. And I never stopped loving you. Nina crossed her arms. You left. I was forced out. You didn't fight to come back. Grace swallowed hard. No. I didn't. A long silence passed. I thought you were dead, Nina whispered. I almost was. Nina leaned against the doorframe, eyes glassy. You lied to me once, on the porch of our old house. Said you'd never leave. Grace nodded. I broke that promise. Nina looked up at the ceiling, exhaling sharply. Then she stepped aside. Come in. Grace blinked. Are you sure? I didn't say stay, Nina said. Just come in. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and laundry. Toys littered the rug. A cat sat curled in a window. Willow peeked out from behind a hallway wall. Who's that? Nina turned toward her. Someone you'll get to know. Grace stood near the threshold, unsure whether to remove her coat. Nina noticed. You can sit. It's okay. Grace took a seat on the couch. Her suitcase stayed by the door. I don't know how to do this, she said. Nina poured a glass of water and handed it to her. Me neither. Grace studied her daughter's face. You look just like your father. Nina half smiled. That used to make me angry. Now I don't think about him much. Grace nodded. A beat of silence. I got your letter, Nina said. Grace's eyes widened. I wrote 100. Only mailed one. It was enough. Another silence. Not as sharp this time. Willow wandered in again, a toy in her hand. Is she really my grandma? Nina glanced at Grace, then back at Willow. Yeah. She is. Grace's heart stuttered. Willow walked up to her, bold and curious. You look tired. Grace smiled, blinking fast. I am, sweetheart. Willow handed her the toy. You can hold this for now. Grace took it carefully, like it might shatter. She looked back up at Nina. You don't have to forgive me. But thank you for letting me step inside. Nina nodded slowly. You're not forgiven. Not yet. But you're here. And that's more than I ever expected. Grace's phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Eliza. I think I'm ready to talk now. I didn't rebuild my life. I built something new, with the wreckage I carried for decades. The sun was setting by the time Grace returned to Margot's house. She unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet warmth, not the sterile quiet it used to be, but the kind filled with waiting. She didn't unpack her suitcase. Instead, she walked to the dining room table and sat. A half-written thank you card lay near Eliza's open laptop. To Mrs. Carrington, for the lilies and the casserole. Grace smiled faintly. The girl was learning how to greet in polite language. Her phone buzzed again. A second text from Eliza. Can we talk in the garden? Grace rose and stepped onto the back porch. The garden was alive with soft color, not well manicured, but real, untamed in places. Margot used to call it controlled chaos. Eliza sat on the stone bench beneath the maple tree, hoodie on, earbuds hanging from her neck. Grace approached slowly. Eliza didn't look up right away. Then, did you find her? Grace nodded. I did. A pause. Was it worth it? Grace sat beside her. Yes. And no. But I'd have done it even if she'd slammed the door in my face. Eliza glanced sideways. She didn't? No. She invited me in. A little. Like someone testing if a wound's healed. Did you cry? Grace laughed under her breath. I didn't dare. They sat in silence, watching the wind move through the trees. I thought I'd feel better after Mom died, Eliza said. Not happy. But lighter. You feel heavier? Eliza nodded. Like someone handed me her guilt. Grace looked at her. It's not yours to carry. She left me with a stranger. Grace's heart twisted. So did life. A beat. But we're not strangers anymore. Eliza's eyes shimmered. I'm not sure what we are. Neither am I, Grace said softly. But it doesn't have to be defined to be real. Eliza rested her chin on her knees. Grace hesitated. She wanted us to take care of each other. She asked you to raise me. No, Grace said. She asked me to stay. I chose to raise you. Eliza blinked fast. You still want to? Grace smiled. I don't think you need raising. I think you need someone who won't walk out when things get hard. Eliza exhaled slowly. Okay. Grace turned to her. Okay? Eliza nodded, then leaned her head lightly on Grace's shoulder. For a moment, neither moved. Inside, the lights turned on automatically as dusk deepened. The kitchen glowed like a memory just starting to be rewritten. Later, Grace cooked dinner, spaghetti with garlic toast, the first meal she'd made in a real kitchen in years. Eliza set the table. Carefully. Almost ritualistically. Grace poured 2 glasses of iced tea. They sat. Not a family. Not yet. But something. Something true. Eliza took a bite, then looked up. What's her name? Willow. Eliza nodded. Pretty. You'd like her, Grace said. She's got a serious glare for a 6-year-old. I had that at 5. They both laughed. The air felt softer now. The grief hadn't vanished, but it had made room for something else. Later that night, Grace sat in Margot's chair at the head of the table. A photo of her mother rested nearby. One of Nina, too. And now Willow's drawing, a crayon sketch of 3 women and a cat. Grace looked around the room. Alive. Lived in. Loved. Once I lived under a bridge. Now I sit at the head of the table, surrounded by women I never thought I'd call family.